I'd leave while you still can. But stick around if you want to. See if I care.
I love a girl who treats me like dirt.
One Piece's 4Kids dub sucks. It's an inferior way of watching the anime. The censorship is bad, the removal of storylines is bad, and if you enjoy it, you have no taste. But okay, now that highly controversial statement is out of the way, I gotta say I really enjoyed watching One Piece's 4Kids dub. Here we have the infamous localization of Eiichiro Oda's One Piece. What was once a grand story meant for all audiences was bastardized as 4Kids marketed it towards children. They really play up the pirate angle here.
You scurvy coward! You ought to walk the plank for not fighting with the rest of us!
That's not it!
I'm sure many of you have seen the various comparisons of the original anime to this version of it. And sure, it's worth all those jokes, but this was kind of all we had back in 2004. And I'm not speaking for the knowledgeable Western fans who knew about fan subbing and other means of watching One Piece. I'm speaking for the target audience. Snot-nosed children like me, whose first and only means of watching One Piece was through this early morning block that only aired on Saturdays. It's because of that I didn't really have a strong attachment to One Piece as a child. I caught it when I could, and if I was even in the mood to watch it, but that wasn't very often. I did eventually decide to get back into One Piece around high school, mostly because I had a super poor grasp on the story, and most of what I knew about it was through word of mouth. But now that I am actually caught up with the manga, I thought it would be cool to go back and give the 4Kids dub a watch. After all, I never saw it in full, and most of what I knew about this version of the show was through memes and discussions that spoke poorly of it. Unfortunately, I do land in the camp that thinks this dub is a mess, but maybe not for the exact same reasons that everyone else does. This show gets joked on and criticized a lot for good reason, but some of those reasons are what made me enjoy watching it so much. For every funny thing that this dub did, like renaming Smoker to Chaser and removing his cigars so he's just breathing a lot of smoke, they would turn around and do something completely stupid that literally butchers the story. Why are we skipping over entire arcs or just reducing them to a single episode? You know how some idiots say you can just skip over certain parts of the story because it runs so long? Well, you don't have to worry about doing that because 4Kids does it for you. Stuff like Little Garden and Laboon are completely gone, and one episode just starts with Nami having the log pose for some reason. To put just how much content was cut out in a better light, the anime made it to 143 episodes by the time the 4Kids run ended, but the 4Kids version only made it to 104. What happened to the other 39 episodes? Now, to be fair to 4Kids, their run never made it to the point where any of these exclusions would raise questions about the consistency of the story. But I also say I don't care. Give me Dorian Bragi, and I'd love to see the 4Kids take on that Crocus scene. It's already hilarious. I want to see how 4Kids would make it better by making it worse. I honestly thought this dub was pretty funny. I was laughing at it more than I was laughing with it, but I thought there were some good lines in there that felt authentic too.
Give me an F! 1-0! 2 days spells food!
Okay, in that voice, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like the English Luffy that you're probably familiar with. But I actually really like this voice for Luffy. I prefer it to current Luffy even. No offense to Colleen Clinkenbeard, I love her in other roles, but I was never a fan of her Luffy, past or modern. It's a bit too deep and cool sounding for me when I always envision Luffy having a younger, more whimsical voice, which I think the 4Kids version does a better job at.
No idea what you mean, Sanji. I don't know anything.
I don't know, Sanji. You got the wrong guy, okay?
Don't take that to mean I prefer all the voices though. I think most of them are good enough for this version of the show, but there are those outliers too. What the hell, Sanji?
First thing I want to do is find some good food, then some pretty girls.
Judging by their history, I'm guessing someone at 4Kids really liked this thick, exaggerated Brooklyn accent. It makes me laugh and it's fun to mock, but it doesn't really work for Sanji's character at all.
I love a girl that treats me like dirt.
love that shit so much. But I think my favorite thing about this show, even more than some of the voices, was all the censorship. Not necessarily the little animation edits like removing Mihawk's crosses or changing Sanji's cigarettes to a lollipop either, but the links they would go to in the writing to not directly refer to death or show blood. Belmir, for instance, was just imprisoned instead of killed by Arlong, and they made sure to include a shot of her a moment later to prove that she's not dead. And do you want to know how Luffy beats Crocodile in this show? Sweat. They won't let him get impaled or bleed, so he just sweats a lot.
Sweat's just as wet as water.
I'm really fond of how much they just hammed it in with some of these rewrites. And honestly, I kind of envy the crew that specifically got to work on coming up with some of these ideas. Like, take a look at this, I love this. These guns are green now, and I guess that makes them water guns? But the Navy has actual water guns in this show, so what makes these green ones less lethal? I genuinely wish this version could have gone on a bit longer, because I would love to see how they handled the series, at least up the thriller part, an arc with explicit death and religious references. Alright, enough of that. While we're on the topic of music, this is a minor thing, but something that really annoyed me when I noticed it. Why is every single second of this show scored? Pot calling the kettle black, I know. I always have music playing in my videos as well, but that's because I don't like my voice. Here, they play the music constantly. Scenes that didn't originally have music behind them now do, and it always changes the tone for the worse. It's like they're telling the idiot children watching this what they're supposed to feel. It's the 4Kids equivalent of a laugh track. But let's say you're tired of all the same humdrum background music and you want something a little bit more. Well, don't worry about that, because every once in a blue moon, 4Kids likes to insert its own original songs into the show. Montages or recaps of what's happening as well.
Get up, yeah. Turn up the heat, yeah. So you can compete.
Some of these scenes did exist in the original anime too, but 4Kids really knows how to make them interesting, as also proven by the pirate rap.
Yo!
More than anything else, this is what I remember from the 4Kids version of the show. Still know all the words too. It's impossible for me to not rap along. I don't remember where I heard this, but I do remember someone saying the winning formula for a good cartoon theme song was to either repeat the name of the show over and over, or just give a brief synopsis of the plot. And 4Kids love doing that with their theme songs. In just 1 minute, we get what the show was about, who the show was about, who all of his friends are, and what his powers are and how he got them.
Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum.
It's kind of understandable why they had to pack so much story into the show's opening though. One Piece is a very long story, and even in the short span of time that 4Kids aired it, they still covered a bunch of ground. East Blue to Alabasta may not seem like the largest amount of time compared to where One Piece is now, but the Straw Hat Pirates have still already gone through a lot by this point in the story. And I can't imagine there were too many children out there who followed this show from start to finish every weekend. I'm sure a bunch of them were lost just like I was, so it was good having this theme song that explained everything.
It's the name of the treasure in the grand line. Yayo, set sail for One Piece.
Yar! Captain Mikey's 4Kids fave, One Piece! Yar!
Alright, so I haven't been entirely truthful. I never really watched One Piece on 4Kids as a child. It was rare that I would ever watch 4Kids at all, and even if I was in the mood to watch One Piece, 4Kids only aired it for about a year. They started airing One Piece way back in 2004 when they were still called Foxbox, but after the 58th episode in 2005, right around when Drum Island was ending, the show would take a little break and come back next year on Cartoon Network. This was primarily how I watched the show back in the day. 4Kids was still responsible for producing the dub and all the merchandising as well. Hey, did you guys notice the Toonami logo in the corner of some of this footage I'm using? That's because by the time they got halfway through releasing the series physically, their ownership of the One Piece license expired. This means two things. One, the only surviving footage of 4Kids' One Piece are rips from TV broadcasts, and 4Kids must have been pretty eager to be rid of One Piece. And that itself raised another question for me. Why did 4Kids acquire One Piece in the first place if they were gonna half-ass it so much? Thankfully, we do have an answer to this question. kinda. One answer I kept seeing around was that 4Kids didn't actually intend to acquire One Piece at all, but because it was a package deal with other anime, namely Shaman King, F-Zero GP Legend, and Tokyo Mew Mew, they were obliged to air it. But that's not entirely true. It's not entirely proven to be true, at least. Listen to this.
I think first we should mention that at the time when the licensing deals were being done for One Piece and Shaman King, I think they were kind of together. They were part of Shonen Jump and, the same licensor, so they were probably some sort of package deal, right? And to be a successful property at the time, you had to be a kid's property, right? Oh, it looks great. It's rating well in Japan. It's kid stuff. Oh, here's all our toys, So I think that the licensing group who acquired it, they were just trying to acquire a hot property. And I think, the ink was dry before the total amount of the programming side of the due diligence was done. And they were stuck with it, so they had to make it work.
Take this answer with a grain of salt, because Mark Kirk wasn't working for 4Kids back when they acquired the show, but he is the best source of information we have when it comes to getting a solid answer. And I 1000% believe 4Kids weren't aware of what they were getting into with One Piece at all. They did very little research on the content of the show, and by the time they realized it was too mature to have its primary audience be children, it was too late. I also believe they absolutely knew what One Piece was and the power it held over in Japan too. Make no mistake about that. I'm sure they wanted the franchise because they assumed it would be profitable like other massively successful anime that they held the licensing rights to as well. But this wasn't gonna work for obvious reasons. Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't have great dubs either, but one was already a show aimed towards children, so who cared? And the mature subjects that Yu-Gi-Oh! Had to work around were handled pretty cleverly. In some ways, you could even argue that the censorship helped both of those shows. But One Piece is so explicit that the only thing censorship does for it is water it down. Where I have a way harder time believing Mark and the rest of the internet is, I can't see a series like One Piece being given up as part of a package deal. This is all speculation, but stick with me. Let's start with why it doesn't make sense to bundle these shows together. I think F-Zero GP Legend and Tokyo Mew Mew just got tacked onto the bundle rumor because back when Foxbox first started teasing One Piece, they also ran a promo called You Pick It, We Play It, where fans got to vote online for which of these three anime they wanted to see on television. And what do you know, all three of them aired anyways. That alone doesn't prove they were all part of some deal. Fans just saw that association and assumed they must have been. None of these shows even share the same production company, which makes it all a lot harder to believe. Shaman King's a bit more understandable because both of these shows were serialized in Shonen Jump originally, but same thing, different studios produced both of these anime. That makes it harder to believe 4Kids acquired the both of them at once. What I have an easier time believing is this random forum post that I came across while looking into the history of 4Kids in One Piece. This user basically says the speculation at the time was that Funimation was sweet talking with Toei to produce an English dub of the show, but 4Kids made them a better offer behind Funimation's back and they missed out. I know what you're thinking. This is a random forum post, how could you believe this? But there's actually some weight behind this. According to reports by Anime News Network, the same guys who did the interview with the 4Kids executive, Funimation was one of the top companies in negotiation with Toei before 4Kids. It even came as a surprise to some fans online that Funimation didn't acquire the licensing rights. And on top of all that, we have existing footage of what Funimation's original dub would have sounded like.
You liked punching him.
Yeah, a little. Luffy! I'm indebted to you for all of your help! I'll never forget it, sir!
Wow, a new Marine thanking a pirate. Maybe I should have punched him too.
This is from a test dub where Toei commissioned at least 3 pilots to separate studios. 2 came from Ocean Productions and 1 came from Funimation. This proves other companies were eager to get One Piece as well, so why would Toei just give this highly sought after anime up in a package deal? Unless that 4Kids offer was really good, then I don't have an answer for you. So looking at all the evidence and information we have, I think the package deal or bundle or whatever you want to call call it rumor, is nothing more than hearsay. If anyone can prove me wrong though, then please do. I'd like to finally get a solid answer on how 4Kids acquired One Piece. And also if we could find out more about why 4Kids acquired One Piece. You know, besides all the sweet merchandising. Speaking of which, let's talk about One Piece's cultural failings. You know, it's one thing to look back on a 20-year-old show and judge it with modern lenses, but it's another thing to experience what it was like actually watching new episodes of it weekly, seeing commercials where it was promoted along with other shows, discussing it with your friends and family, seeing bits and pieces of it in the real world. You know, just growing up with these shows. I have a bunch of fond memories, meeting my best friend through Pokemon, my cousins introducing me to Dragon Ball Z through that dogshit Sagas game, thinking I knew how to do the Chidori because I saw Sasuke do the hand signs in Clash of the Ninja Revolution 2. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those same nostalgic attachments to One Piece, be it through the show, or the card games, or any other media. And sure, this isn't a direct mark on the quality of the anime itself, but what does it say when you poorly market a show towards children because you wanted the merchandising rights to sell toys and games to them, but then you still completely fail to grab their attention? I'm only speaking from my own personal American experience here as someone who was in 4Kids' target demographic when they were airing One Piece. But the series had very little cultural cachet with me or anyone else I knew back then. Where were the One Piece trading cards and toys? They only had a handful of One Piece video games released in the West, which I'll talk about some more in a later video, and I think this is 4Kids' biggest failing. Yeah, One Piece became a joke in the West, but do you know who likes jokes more than anyone else? Children. You know your audience, so why didn't you appeal to them as much as you could have? Hindsight is 2020, and I don't know what was going on in the 4Kids building when the show was airing. I'm sure they got a bunch of hate mail. But they already ruined the anime, so they should have just leaned into the silliness as much as they could have. Instead, it seems like they just wanted to get rid of the dub as soon as possible and sweep it under the rug.
It was a mess. It was a boondoggle, right? So it was. I think no one can look back and say, oh, that was, you know, something that is great. It ended up being something that has, you know, tarred the reputation of the company.
After 4Kids lost the One Piece license, Funimation picked it up again proper this time. But we still had to wait a long time for One Piece to become culturally relevant in the West. And now that it is, I say cool. Can we get a new Pirate Warriors? 4Kids itself has been gone for a long while now, and thankfully their dub just seems like nothing more than a confusing era of One Piece today. And some good news, it doesn't seem like they left a lasting mark on the series. Not any huge ones at least. Zoro is still called Zolo in the English releases of the manga to this day, but from what I can tell, that's about all the damage that 4Kids left. Everything else was deemed appropriately stupid and became ignored. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the 4Kids dub is terrible. There were things I enjoyed about it, like Luffy's voice and the creativity, or lack thereof, of the censorship, but there wasn't a single thing that I think redeems this dub. I don't think it's unwatchable, but it's really not worth going out of your way to find this dub just so you can watch it. You're not getting some misunderstood hidden gem here. You're getting exactly what you think you are with this dub. Who I would recommend this anime to are those of you who want to marvel at all the censorship. Maybe those of you who doubt it's as bad as it seems, or wants to look a bit deeper into the obscure details of One Piece's past. There's definitely some cool stuff I left out, like the Odex stuff.
What did you ask about Zoro?
You think you'd be interested in being part of my crew?
You can make your complaints about Funimation's dub of One Piece, or even Toei's original adaptation of the manga itself. But 4Kids' One Piece is a nice reminder it could always be worse.
Next up, the Grand Line!
Yo!
What the fuck is up with Sanji's voice? Were the voice actors high on crack? Yes.
Were they on drugs when they made this?
The angry video game dork.